So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Kaurna people, traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded, and their fight for self-determination continues today. This always was and always will be First Nations land, and it's the responsibility of each of us to take part in delivering that self-determination. There is no disability justice without First Nations justice. So we have local comedian and disability advocate Charlie Kay with us to talk about public speaking and presentation. So I'm gonna hand over and I'll click when you need me to click.
No worries, thank you. This hello room full of ghosts is beautiful, and hello to people watching the recording. Is there anyone on Zoom actually at the moment? Hello Zoom people. My name is Charlie, and I'm going to be talking to you about public speaking and presenting for the academic workshops that DIDA is running, or DIDA, depending on your persuasion. So if you go to the next slide, please. It should just be the space bar. So hello, as Shona already said, my name is Charlie. I do comedy, I also do disability advocacy, and I did my degree at Adelaide Uni, my undergrad, which was a Bachelor of Arts, and I did my postgrad at Flinders, which was in screen and media. This is important contextual information because the information that I'm going to be relaying comes with that context. So while I think a lot of the tips and tricks I will give you can apply to all disciplines, just keep in mind that my information does come from a place of, I'm not an expert in public speaking, but as someone who is disabled, neurodivergent, I had to learn certain tools and tricks to manage my barriers that I came into contact with over my course of my study in the arts. And what we're going to talk about today is the 3 stages of doing a presentation. So we have before, during, and after. So you can go to the next slide. Those are the words that I just said. And so what we're going to talk about with before is identifying your barriers, communicating those barriers, and then preparing yourself to combat them, as well as preparing yourself for the actual presentation and in a way that will make you feel confident going into it. So during is going to be talking about my little patented tips and tricks, Charlie approved, for managing nerves, anxiety, and delivering as confident as you feel you can be presentation. And for after, we're going to talk about the for lack of a better word, aftercare of a presentation that can also help you prepare for the next one you might have to do down the road. So the first section, before. So the first thing we need to do is identify our barriers. These are things that obviously we might come across not because of our own faults, but because of the academic structures. So if you go to the next slide, that is, again, just the words I said. I will talk more about my slide formats in a minute. So things like, you might need to sit. I'm someone that deals with chronic pain, and especially it was quite bad during my studies. So I would often ask to sit during my presentations to classes. You also might need to deliver a presentation just to a small group, or just to your tutor. So making sure that you understand what you need and writing those things down. So you have a list that you can refer to, and you can also add to at any time. And knowing that certain requirements might change and develop. So the next thing is we're going to communicate. And the important thing about this communication to your tutor, your lecturer, or course facilitator is that you make sure that these things are communicated as non-negotiables. So if you do need to sit, say, I will have to sit for my presentation. It's really important that you are given the same opportunities as other students, but also that your needs are met. And you shouldn't need an access plan to have access. So I didn't go through university with an access plan. I do regret it a little bit, but I found the actual process of acquiring an access plan to be quite overwhelming. and it was incompatible with my own disability. So if you're like me, maybe you don't have the spoons to go and acquire an access plan, or maybe it just seems a bit difficult at the time, just understand that your access needs should still be met and can still be met. So communicating these things as non-negotiables, saying to your tutor, I'm going to need to give my presentation just to you, or I'm going to need to record my presentation and have it watched just by you, making sure that you set really clear boundaries. And the other thing I want to suggest you can communicate with your tutor is actually suggesting to them that they can open up these alternatives to the rest of the class. So saying maybe what you could do is tell the class early on, say, if you prefer to sit during a presentation, feel free, so that when you're sitting, that idea has already been thrown out there. And also it might help other chronically ill students, or students that just deal with anxiety, or just would just feel more comfortable sitting. That opens that up for them as well. So your tutor might not agree to do this. That's obviously their choice, but just throwing that idea out there, so it is more of an open communication thing then. And it just helps normalize these access needs that we require. So next slide, preparation. So there are 3 facets of my little preparation tips. So first one is structure. And the structure is just simply following a very standard essay structure. You will notice that the structure I'm about to tell you is what I'm actually giving you right now. It's a little bit of a fourth wall meta thing. So if you go to the next thing, you can see the structure of a standard presentation. You've got your introduction, and in your introduction you're like, I'm going to tell you this. And then you have your points, point 1, point 2, point 3, and then your conclusion. And your conclusion's like, I told you that. It's real simple and it seems very obvious, but it's a really easy way to then organize your thoughts. So you can be like, everything you want to talk about, write everything you want to talk about down, and then you can sort them into 3 different sections. So I actually have a presentation that I did for something else here that I've done this for, where I have my title, I have my introduction, I have my first section, my second section, and my third section. And I wrote down all the things I wanted to talk about on different pieces of paper, and then I put them into what section I thought they applied to. There are going to be a lot of the time crossovers, and that's fine. It's just about organizing your thoughts and having everything you want to say, and then just figuring out where it applies. And this way, it's a lot less overwhelming to actually deliver and prepare a speech. So I also just get this. Yep. So sorry, we can go to the next point. So the slides. You can see my slides are pretty minimalist. They don't necessarily have to be, but this is what I recommend in terms of actually making aesthetically pleasing slides. And all these little things about the preparation are actually tools to then help you feel more confident when you deliver the speech. So having very minimalist slides is a lot easier on the eye. So if you're like, look at my slides, aren't they beautiful? And now listen to my words, aren't they great? You're like, you got some beautiful slides to back you up. You're like, I feel great. So full bleed images, I had one before with structure, you might have noticed. It covered the entire expanse of the slide. So having, you're like, I can't see the edges of that image. And you're like, whoa, that looks great, because having a full bleed image is quite aesthetically pleasing, rather than having images like squared or images around the place, which you won't see necessarily. You'll see little graphics on mine, but not any squared off, non-transparent images. So that is the first thing, having full bleed images, limit information, because too much information on a slide is overwhelming, and you want to be able to speak the information. You don't want people reading information. And finally, Canva. And it has an exclamation point because I'm really excited about it. I do not work for Canva. I wish I did. I'm a big advocate for it because it's super, super accessible to use. It gives you the guidelines of the printing guidelines and also like the graphic design guidelines of how like you should be framing things within a space. And also tells you how to line things up. Like when I was doing this, it was showing me how to line up all my text so it was all on the same line. And it just has good color palettes, and it's really, really easy to use. And it's a lot easier to use than something like Adobe Illustrator. And unless you're a graphic design student, you don't have to learn how to use Adobe Illustrator. Big fan of Canva, has a huge selection of graphics and images that are free, and you don't need to pay for it to make something that looks good. So if you need to do a presentation, highly recommend doing your slides in Canva. You don't have to, that's just my opinion. And yeah, next one, remembering. This is a cute little graphic I got from Canva. So when you are preparing to your speech and you need to go through that stage of actually remembering it to a degree that you know you're not off the cuff the entire time, here are some of the things that I find help me. So practicing in a non-confronting environment. This could be your bedroom, but then also practicing within that environment to something. So it's an object, it can be a soft toy, it can be a pet, it can be a mirror if you're like, I love to look at myself, narcissist vibes. This is really, really helpful because it can just help you feel a bit more comfortable, but also another way that you can then take this a step further is practicing when you're already doing a an activity that doesn't require a lot of cognitive thought. So like washing the dishes or driving or having a shower. I practice things when I'm driving all the time. If I'm driving to a stand-up gig, I'm doing my set while I'm driving. And I'm focusing on the road too, so don't worry. But it helps me remember, and it helps me feel a bit more comfortable because I'm already focused on another activity to a degree that I don't have to like second guess myself. And you just speak and you let whatever words come out. And then if you might say something really cool and you're like, oh yeah, I've got to put that in my speech. So I find that really helps. Another thing I do is I write out everything phonetically like an essay that I'd want to say. And then I record myself saying that. And then I have an audio file that I can listen to as well. So this really helps me not only remember all the information that I want to relay, but also you do have then some sort of mental imprint of your own vocal cadences, which can actually help then you mimic those during the presentation. I'm not a scientist, so don't, if you're like some sort of scientist that is like, that's not true to life, that's totally fair. This is what I found helps me actually then sound a bit more comfortable, a bit more confident, because I'm not a natural public speaker, I'm not a natural presenter. And so it's more about how I navigate the act of public speaking and presenting with my limitations, and how then I go into them not feeling super overwhelmed and anxious because I know that I have these different tools in my tool belt or arsenal or whatever metaphor you want to use. So those are the things I would use to prepare. So we're on to the next section. Thank you Canva for this. If you go to the next bit, there's a cute little graphic also from Canva. So these are little things that I like to recommend you can do during the speech to manage things like nerves and anxiety. So I already mentioned sitting down. If you are someone that has shaky hands, I recommend sitting or having your notes in front of you and on a table. This is another non-negotiable you can present to the tutor. I need a table in front of me when I present so I can put my notes down on it. I don't want to hold cue cards because if your hands are shaking, you might feel less confident and you might be worried people are focusing on your hands and not your beautiful words or your beautiful Canva TM slides. So really recommend putting notes down on a surface or sitting, and you can maybe hold your hold your cue cards with your elbows on the table. Helps you stabilize yourself. If you go to the next slide, this is my favorite thing to do. So notes to self. Whenever I do have my my page of dot points, I write little notes to myself. These notes can be things like little reminders, pace yourself, Or it can be little affirmations. You got this. Breathe. Smiley faces. This really helps me. And also I think it's like a really good way to remind yourself of things that you need to deliver a great speech. So when you write, slow down, pace yourself, write it in a different color. If you've printed out the notes, write it in pen, highlight it, write it in different font, things like that can really help remind yourself, like if you have a habit of talking faster than normal, which I do, writing slow down between paragraphs or between dot points really helps remind myself to like take a breath and actually then start at a slower pace and a pace that is a bit more easier to follow. So these I really do recommend. Back to tips and tricks again. These again are just general little things that I like to do. So in terms of eye contact, let's face it, the audience members don't want to make eye contact with you. You don't want to make eye contact with them. We're all like, don't want to look into these little orbs. So I really recommend using forehead tricks where you stare into some center of someone's forehead. And that way they're like, you're making eye contact with me. And you're like, no, I'm not. And you're communicating telepathically in this situation. So, or you can stare over at the crown of someone's head or the top of someone's head. And that kind of then makes them feel like, oh, they're looking at someone behind me. Poor them, you know. So it's just little things that make you still look connected to your audience without, you know, having to feel that anxiety of like, I have to look at everyone and it's really uncomfortable to look at people in your eyes. It might distract you, but it's just a little thing that I find is really good. It looks still like you're doing the thing. So foreheads, center of the forehead at the evil eye. Another thing I really also like to recommend is that thinking of yourself as an audience member. So when you're watching someone's speech, remembering what you're thinking and what you're feeling at that time. So that's something that really helps me when I do comedy. I don't go into a stand-up gig going, this audience doesn't want to laugh. Like, because they do. Obviously, they're there for one thing. And the class is there for one thing as well. They are there to do their own presentations. And when you're watching their presentations, what you're thinking is, I got to do my own presentation. Or look at all those colors and shapes in front of me. I'm not thinking about this presentation at all. I'm thinking about food or whatever. You know, usually you find yourself zoning out during other people's presentations. It's unfortunate, but it's true. People do not think about you as much as you think about yourself. So that's something I really do recommend, is just remembering who you are as an audience member and applying that to everyone else. You're not malicious, you're compassionate. You don't want someone to do badly, you want someone to do well. And most of all, you just don't really care that much. And finally, this one's really, really important. Make sure you present as yourself. What does that mean? It means not going up there if you're someone who maybe like me is a bit more casual and presenting very formally in like a newsreader. And today we are going to talk about this. That doesn't sound authentic and it will make you a bit uncomfortable. So if you go up there and present as yourself, and if you are more of a formal person, not trying to be all like, hey, like making jokes, just be lame, but be yourself and really make sure that you are comfortable and feeling secure when you're up here, knowing that, you know, you don't have to pretend to be super confident if you're not confident. Like I don't feel super confident when I'm delivering a speech, and I don't try to seem super confident. I'm a bit zany and I will sometimes zone out. And that's just what's going to happen, but I allow myself room to make mistakes. And also giving yourself room to make mistakes is super, super important. And allowing yourself a moment to breathe and refer back to your notes if you lose your place. And rather than just going, and then trying to keep pushing through when you don't know what you're meant to be talking about. Okay, we're on to the third section, after. So, what the 3 stages of after I came up with relax, reward, and reflect. So let's talk about relax. This is really, really important if you find presenting very anxiety-inducing, stressful, that you do some sort of meditative practice. I don't mean meditation necessarily, although that might be your meditative practice. For me, my meditative practice is playing a video game I played 100 times already, or painting. It's something that helps you zone out. It's something that helps your brain just go flatline, no thoughts, empty head. So this is really, really important. It helps your anxiety just chill out for a bit, and it lets you just not think about anything, just truly be at one with the universe vibes. All right, the next thing, this is the most important one, you reward yourself. Because if you're like, all right, I got to do my speech today, but after my speech, I'm going to the bookshop and I'm going to buy myself a book, or after the speech, I'm going to the movies with my friend, or I'm going to go and have a donut at the bakery I like. You then approach the day with positive anticipation. For me, right now, doing this speech, I was a little stressed, but I'm remembering that tomorrow I have a really cool event that I'm really excited to go to, and now I'm like super pumped. So it's allowing that positive anticipation for another thing to actually counteract the stress of the presentation. So it's really, really important that you allow yourself to reward yourself for doing something. Like doing a speech for some people can be really hard, especially if you're disabled, you're chronically ill, you're neurodivergent. You have to deal with things and different boundaries and different limitations that other students who don't experience what you experience have. So even if you feel like, oh, I didn't do very well, still reward yourself because you did something tricky, and that deserves a reward. You deserve a little treat. And sometimes little treats are why we get up in the morning, and sometimes we just want some donuts. All right, so that's really, really important. Make sure you reward yourself. Okay, and this is the worst one. Reflect. After you've relaxed, after you've rewarded, it's reflection time. So first we self-reflect. Self-reflection is where we write a list of what we did well, and it's really important to acknowledge what you did well and what you felt maybe you could improve on. And that is something that then you can refer to at any point in the future. And then, unfortunately, when we do throw assignments and different assessed tasks into the abyss does speak back to us. So your tutor or your course facilitator will have feedback. And if you are someone that has rejection sensitivity, this can be the worst thing in the world. So receiving feedback is sometimes so difficult that we might not even read the feedback at all. And obviously this is to our own detriment because then we are not actually learning how to improve. So this is my recommendation as someone who never reads feedback directly. I get a trusted person to relay the feedback to me. They read it, they relay it to me in their own words. And as long as they get all the information that's there and they relay all the information correctly, it's super, super helpful. So not them being like, oh, well, you did great and there was nothing. So make sure they actually give you the information, but saying it through the mouthpiece of someone that you trust and someone that you know is a reliable source as well, and also it will help you process those feedbacks and those criticisms in a bit more of a palatable way. I find it's really, really helpful. So, getting a friend or getting a therapist or even a doctor, just a GP to read your feedback, talk it through with you. Or the writing centre, I'm sure as well, can help you out with that. So going to the writing centre and asking them to run through feedback with you. Just making sure that if it is something that you find super stressful, you don't have to do it alone. And so many other students deal with this. But it's making sure that you still get the information that you need to do, that you need to have in a safe and non-triggering way. And then write all that down, all that information down, and then you have a huge list of notes that you can refer to in future when you have your next presentation. It's like, okay, my last presentation, I, maybe didn't do such a great conclusion, or I didn't refer to sources as much as I needed to. You have all that information there, and it's something that obviously is very much unique to an academic environment. In future, when you have to do presentations and stuff at work, or even if you have to do a speech at a birthday party, you're not going to get people going, that was great, except these points. You have a bit more freedom to experiment with your style and experiment with the way you want to present. But in an academic environment, it's super, super important to get that feedback, reflect on it, and grow and develop from there. So, so thank you so much for listening to what I had to say today. So just to recap, we did talk about how to approach a presentation and the 3 stages of that being before, during, after. Before, making sure that you identify your needs, that you communicate those needs, but then you also prepare in a way that you feel comfortable, that you feel safe, and that you find will help you and your learning styles. Because I suggested oral learning kind of style techniques, but you might be a visual learner, so you might find it easier just to read over and over again. So it just depends on your own learning styles. Then obviously during, we have different little tips and tricks that I ran through. So just making sure as well that you find what works for you, because the things that I've told you might not work for you, and that's totally fine, but it's giving yourself the space and the freedom to explore different options and actually find what works for you, because you don't have to do things in a conventional way, and you don't have to do things in the expected way. You just have to do things in a way that makes you feel comfortable. And then, afterwards, obviously making sure that you relax, that you reward, get yourself a little treat, and that you reflect, and that you have something that you can, in future, learn from and grow from, and hopefully feel more comfortable and confident giving presentations and public speaking for the rest of your academic career and then the rest of your life. So thank you so much. You can go to you go down. Thank you. I made that in Canva. Thank you.